Hi everyone. This is one of my original horror stories. I don't have any animation or illustrations, so I am actually in the market for anyone who'd be willing to do that. I'm definitely going to commission, so don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do it for free. So if you're interested in helping me out with illustrating or animating, which would be amazing, my horror stories, please comment below, leave your Instagram or Twitter or anything where I can see your animation or just your pictures you draw so I can add some stuff to this because I know it might get a little boring just watching a blank screen. So, yeah, I hope y'all enjoy. I felt so damn pathetic and stupid as I sat awkwardly in the cramped booth. I kept adjusting my tie and sitting up straighter to make my chest look bigger. Speed Date 2.0, read in fancy pink letters across the door. My friends had convinced me that this was fun and would be a good way to get over my breakup with Tiffany. I rolled my eyes at the idea and frowned. Tiffany and I had dated for nearly 2 years, and suddenly it comes to my attention that she's been dating another and older guy for nearly 10 months now. It was messy, very humiliating in many aspects, and I was prepared to let it become one of those things adults just don't talk about. A school-like bell rang and I sat up quickly. The door opened slowly and a short but pretty girl walked in with a big grin on her face. She seemed nice. It also relaxed me. Hey, I'm Andrew. Nice to meet you. Charlene, charmed. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm not looking for a boyfriend or anything, but I definitely can make it worth your while, she said. I was a bit confused and smiled awkwardly and shrugged as she continued. So, what are you into? I'm pretty much open to anything as long as you have the resources. It finally became clear. She was a working girl. Oh, sorry. I'm not in the market for something like that. I tried my best not to offend, but at this point, I couldn't really make a connection with her. Oh! Well, no one normally is, but I can assure you I am discreet and I am perfect. She winked, and suddenly that cute exterior of hers became a bit sickening as I noticed the bags under her eyes and how her makeup was caked on too much and didn't match the tone of her body. No, thank you, honestly. Her smile dropped and she leaned back and smacked her teeth. What are you, some fag or something? She spit at me. I rolled my eyes and drew in a breath. I'm not gay, if that's what you mean. And you shouldn't say fag. It's offensive to some people, I replied. Oh, I'll say whatever the fuck I want, fag, she screeched back. I slowly rolled my head up to the ceiling and groaned. Almost immediately, the school bell went off, and I snapped my head back at her direction and smiled. Well, it was nice talking to you, I said with a smirk. She stood up quickly and gave me the finger as she stormed out, grumbling about how I was gay and that she was worth more than that. The door closed behind her and I prepared myself to leave. The first one of the night, and I was already being solicited by prostitutes. As I grabbed my coat, the door opened again and a tall, curvy figure swayed in. My heart seemed to stop, just looking at her. She closed the door slowly and remained standing by the door. She seemed to tower over me, and her presence was enveloping the room. She had on a short black dress with tasteful cleavage. Her hair was long and black and hung straight down her back. Her skin was pale and her lips were full and a deep red. But it was her eyes. It was her eyes that made my heart pound aggressively. They were big, but had a deep blue iris. And her lashes were long and dark. I, uh, I, I'm Andrew, I said. I stood and reached my hand out to her. She walked slowly up to me and extended her hand. When we touched, I seemed to melt into her. Her hand was warm and her grasp was tender yet strong. Call me Lucy. She smiled a gorgeous smile with perfect teeth. She pulled back her hand and seemed to float to the cushioned chair before me. She sat and placed both hands on the armrest and smiled up at me. Andrew, I have a secret, she stated. My heart dropped and I knew in an annoyed breath and looked at her blankly. I swear, if she was a prostitute too, I was going to be forced to think this whole thing was a brothel in disguise. She laughed out loud at me, and I felt a bit uneasy. I'm not a whore, if that's what you're thinking, she said. She giggled and winked and looked at the ceiling. I looked up too, trying to see what she saw, but saw nothing but decaying crack of bad upkeep. Isn't it funny how people are so desperate to find a connection with other people? She asked. I looked back at her and she was suddenly staring at me. Yeah, I guess that's human nature, I shrugged. Yes, misery loves company, I suppose, she said. That was a weird way of thinking about it, but it did seem to make sense at this time. Every relationship I'd ever been in seemed to end in some type of misery, yet we still tried to cling on to something we knew wouldn't work. Like we were desperate to be with someone, even if it caused us pain. Andrew, are you a religious man? She asked. No, I like to think I'm spiritual. I believe in a higher power, but I don't attend services. She nodded and smiled a bit. Well, that's understandable. Would you consider yourself a good man? She asked. I started to feel as though I was being interrogated, but I continued to answer her questions. Well, I like to think so. I don't do anything that would say otherwise. Lucy's gaze seemed to drill into my being, and I felt almost naked in her presence. She became silent, and only the steady but soft chatter of people around us echoed in our little room. I'd realized that the bell hadn't rang in almost 20 minutes, which was odd, but I would prefer to be in the presence of Lucy rather than others. um, what are some of your pet peeves? I asked, regretting that I had to clear my throat to start a sentence. I felt that if I could push the conversation at least, I could get more information on this strange beauty. I only have one pet peeve, she said. She was silent once again for a moment and then began to speak. I hate it when people are only nice or kind because they fear this greater power. I frowned at her response and she commenced to explain. Do you know how so many people claim to love God or gods, depending on what religion, and treat people with this almost toxic and superficial kindness, only because they want to be seen as good to this God? She said. Well, does it matter why people are kind? Shouldn't it be enough that they are kind? I asked. Lucy's brow furrowed and she frowned. No, it does matter. It matters because you should try to be a good person, because you feel like it, because you feel that connection to another human being, not because you fear eternal damnation from an invisible God. I started to squirm in my seat and felt as though the temperature in the room had increased drastically. How is it that people can dedicate their lives to something they've never experienced? With their senses they can trust, yet cannot dedicate their lives to the things they've lived among. The earth, the creatures that inhabit it, and the people that populate it? How can such a person live on a planet and disregard what they actually experience so that they may experience their own imagination? She asked. I didn't have an answer. I didn't want to answer. I prayed the bell would ring and she would move on, but it seemed as though a thick humidity had come upon our area and time stood still. Who are you? I felt the need to ask. My paranoia was telling me something, but my common sense was telling me another. I didn't want to believe either, so I asked. Lucy's face smoothed and she seemed to relax. The temperature dropped slowly, but we still seemed to be stuck in this moment. The chatter around us was now repetitive, the same noises occurring in a loop. You know who I am, Andrew. We've been through this, she said with a sigh. Why are you here? This isn't a place you'd normally be found, I said. My skin became chilled from the sweat that had accumulated. She didn't answer immediately, but looked up at the ceiling. A slow tear rolled down her face. Because I want to know what he sees in you all. Her gaze stayed on the ceiling. What? Who? She snapped her head down and looked at me with big, bloodshot eyes. I want to know what he sees in you all. You are all monsters, yet he finds it in his heart to love and forgive you, she said sternly. I leaned away from her as her breathing became more quick, and she stared at me with an intensity that scared me greatly. I don't know what you're talking about, I said quickly. I looked past her to the door, but in its place seemed to be a wall. I looked all over the room and quickly realized we were locked in. I looked back at her and her face was intense with hatred. It's the type of face someone shows to something they're disgusted by, such as how a parent looks at a pedophile. You and your kind are disgusting creatures. Yet your higher power seems to love you unconditionally. You all have created terrible ways to torment and execute each other, but if you fall to your knees and ask for forgiveness, he will grant it. How is that fair? I've done none of the things you've all done. I've never killed. I've never raped. I've never tortured. I only wanted to be great, and I could no longer be in his presence. My mind immediately went to quoting scripture. My lips moved rapidly. She let out a gruff but short laugh. Oh, now you pray. Stop it. I don't want to do anything to you. I wouldn't dare touch the filth that you're covered in. Her anger entered my soul, and I was frightened. Well, you did compare yourself to him, I piped up. She looked at me and laughed hysterically and threw her hands in the air. So? Is that so wrong? I saw potential. Is it not right to notice yourself? I didn't answer in fear of her reaction. She stared at me deeply. None of you deserve to be in his presence. You're a sick project he started but got bored and left. That's why he gave you consciousness. He gave you his mind and left you at your own accordance. She leaned in and began to radiate a foul smell that made me gag. Isn't that a scary thought? That everything that has happened on this earth, the plagues, the genocide, the misdoing, were all of his plans? He gave you his mind and was terrified at the result. You're like a child that abuses small animals, and your parents refuse to acknowledge that you have a problem. He coddles you because he feels sorry for his creation. Tears began to flow from my eyes, and I felt angry yet sad because she spoke nothing but truth. I lied, she said. She laughed again, and this time it seemed to ring throughout the room. About what? I said. I found that I had pushed myself further away from her. I have more than one pet peeve. My heart dropped because I knew this was the crescendo of her anger. I hate that you all blame me for everything that has happened. The room went silent, and even the fake chatter went quiet. My ears ringed from the lack of sound, and I felt my gaze become blurry. I am so sorry, I whispered. I clenched my eyes shut and whispered scriptures to myself. I felt her breathe near my face and felt my stomach drop as she spoke. Sorry does not save me. I snapped my eyes open and found myself back in the room. Lucy was gone, and the temperature was back to normal. The bell rang, and I almost leapt from my seat. The door opened, and another woman walked in. She had a soft smile, but this didn't comfort me. I grabbed my coat and ran for the door, almost pushing the woman away. When I got home, I grabbed the first religious icon I could find, which was coincidentally the old Bible Tiffany had left. I clutched it and rocked back and forth, trying to go over the night in my head, but couldn't quite make the details clear. I walked to the kitchen and decided a beer was in order, but as I reached for the handle, I noticed a small note taped to the door. Good talk. Can't wait to see you again. Lucy.